Burkina Faso names an ex-diplomat as interim leader. Ferguson, Missouri caught the world's attention after the shooting death of a black teenager. But not all residents agree on how the town has been depicted.
At Christmas time.
And some of the hottest stars in music unite to combat Ebola. Africa 54 starts right now.
It's Christmas time at all.
Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Tonight, in West Africa, officials in Burkina Faso have named former Foreign Minister Michel Kafando as the country's interim president. His first major task is to lead the country back to civilian rule. A committee made up of politicians, army representatives and civil and religious leaders announced the selection of Mr. Kafando Monday, a day after beginning talks to fill the post.
D'ores et déjà, je prends l'engagement.
I pledge on behalf of the government and the other organs of the transition, we will spare no effort to rise to the challenge. Our credibility and the future of our country after these terrible days are at stake and are needed to restore confidence as we move forward.
Surtout de l'avenir de notre cher pays.
Burkina Faso's military seized power last month after longtime ruler Blaise Compaoré abruptly stepped down in the face of protests against his efforts to change the constitution and allow him to run for re-election next year. The army named Lieutenant Colonel Isaac Yakuba Zida as an interim leader, and he pledged to quickly hand power to a transitional authority.
We realize the magnitude of this event, both for our people and for the other people of the continent and beyond.
The African Union had warned the military to establish the interim government and pick an interim president by Monday or face possible sanctions. Mr. Kafando will next appoint a prime minister, which is expected to happen later this week. Now to the Ebola crisis. A doctor from Sierra Leone who had been flown to the U.S. for treatment has died. The Nebraska Medical Center released a statement Monday saying Martin Ciala had died as a result of advanced symptoms of the disease. He was the third Ebola patient to be treated at the hospital and the second person to die of the disease in the United States. The World Health Organization Friday reported a slight rise in the Ebola death toll, saying there have been nearly 5,200 deaths among over 14,000 confirmed cases worldwide since the start of the current outbreak. Now, the WHO says there has been a sharp rise in the number of cases in Sierra Leone, including 421 new infections reported last week. While the White House has confirmed the beheading of American aid worker Abdul Rahman Kasig by Islamic State militants. He is the third American to be decapitated in Syria by the violent extremist group. President Barack Obama condemned his killing, calling it an act of pure evil. Kasig, a 26-year-old former Army Ranger, was seized 13 months ago while doing humanitarian work in war-torn Syria. The Islamic State group released a video Sunday that purported to show extremists beheading several Syrian soldiers and ended with a militant claiming to have killed Kasig. Well, United Nations investigators have found Islamic State commanders responsible for war crimes and crimes against humanity on a massive scale. And our viewers Latza Hoke has more.
At least 200,000 people have fled into neighboring Turkey for fear of atrocities from the rampaging Islamic State fighters. The fears are not unfounded, according to the results of a UN inquiry.
The Commission paints a devastating picture of civilian life inside ISIS-controlled areas in northeastern Syria. Executions, amputations and lashings in public spaces have become a regular occurrence.
Anything can provoke a harsh retribution: smoking a cigarette, talking to a member of opposite sex, a minor theft. Witnesses reported seeing bodies hanging from crosses and heads placed on spikes in public places. Children have been pressed to inform on their parents and watch public executions, and some have been recruited to fight for Islamic State as child soldiers, all in violation of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child.
I personally interviewed a kid in a refugee camp who had been taken by the group, and his friends had had their fingers chopped off.
UN investigators have found the Islamic State commanders individually responsible for a host of crimes against humanity, noting also that some of them are foreigners.
Some of the leaders, or those close to the top leadership, are foreigners. So they are in control, and that gives rise to even greater necessity to enable the countries of origin to act before it's too late.
Since US-led airstrikes began targeting IS positions in September, the insurgents began moving into local houses and farms, causing civilian casualties. They also blocked delivery of humanitarian aid in provinces under their control.
So it is salutary that we are able to highlight areas such as food deprivation, starvation, which is actually an illegality. It's a breach of humanitarian law.
The UN Refugee Agency has been providing aid to Syrians displaced by the civil war between the government and the opposition. It is getting short of funds as the number of people displaced by violence grows.
It's an extreme situation. Last year, we saw children freezing to death inside Syria. This year, we've had to prioritize, because of limited funding, on those whom we can reach, but there are others who are going to be in a very tough situation.
The 47-nation Human Rights Council in Geneva authorized the panel to investigate all alleged violations of international human rights law since March 2011 in Syria and to identify the perpetrators when possible so that they can be prosecuted. The report is based on more than 300 interviews with victims and witnesses. Zlarica Hope, VOA News, Washington.
Well, the meeting of G20 leaders in Brisbane, Australia, wrapped up over the weekend, capping a week of regional summits that have been full of awkward moments between U.S. President Barack Obama and Russian President Vladimir Putin. VOA White House correspondent Luis Ramirez reports from Brisbane.
As fighting intensified in Ukraine, a recently divorced President Putin appeared to be on a charm offensive, starting at the APEC summit in Beijing, where cameras caught him putting a shawl on the wife of Chinese President Xi Jinping, which her aides promptly replaced. But it was the informal but uncomfortable encounters between the Russian and U.S. leaders in which they looked in each other's direction but not at each other that made the news. There were no smiles behind the scenes as the two leaders spent a total of about 15 minutes together. Ukraine topped the conversations. At the G20 in Brisbane, Mr. Obama did not waste the chance to further isolate Mr. Putin. There, the two leaders had more encounters.
I would characterize them as typical of our interactions, which are businesslike and blunt.
The Australians showed Mr. Putin the same hospitality they showed other leaders. They let him hold and pet their koalas, just as President Obama got to do. But no one here in Australia has forgotten that Russia is blamed for the downing of Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 that killed 298 people, including 28 Australians. President Obama joined leaders of Japan and Australia, who voiced their opposition to Russia's actions in Ukraine and called for those who brought the Malaysia plane down to be brought to justice. Throughout the G20, there were smiles and handshakes, but little mincing of words. At a private meeting, Canada's Stephen Harper told Mr. Putin, "I guess I'll shake your hand, but I have only one thing to say to you. You need to get out of Ukraine." In his remarks Sunday, President Obama offered Mr. Putin a way back to better relations.
My communications to him was no different than what I've said publicly, as well as what I've said to him privately over the course of this crisis in Ukraine. And that is, Russia has the opportunity to take a different path.
While other leaders remained in Brisbane until after lunch Sunday, Mr. Putin was among the first to leave the gathering. Luis Ramirez, VOA News, Brisbane.
Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, sending a message of interfaith harmony from one of America's best-known churches. Stay with us.
What exactly is Ebola?
Can I catch Ebola through the air?
Are the people who have it contagious?
What is our government doing about Ebola?
What are the symptoms of Ebola?
You have questions about Ebola? Straight Talk Africa has answers. VOA presents Straight Talk Africa, Ebola. Knowledge is life. A special town hall meeting with leading experts on the front lines who will answer many of the questions surrounding the Ebola outbreak. VOA presents Straight Talk Africa, Ebola, Knowledge is Life. November 19th, only on VOA.
Well, now to the U.S., where the situation in Ferguson, Missouri is tense as the small St. Louis suburb awaits the announcement to a grand jury investigation into the shooting death of an unarmed black teenager by a white police officer. Protests and violence earlier this year gripped the nation and made headlines worldwide. VOA's Ayesha Tansim has more.
This is Ferguson. This is also Ferguson. The way these streets look symbolizes how their residents experience life and race relations in the community.
In reality, it's a very progressive city. Of any city, it's surprising it happened here because we are so progressive and diverse.
Right, right. That lets you know it is a problem.
Toriana Johnson works at a neighborhood barbershop right where protesters and police clashed last August. He says people here feel like they don't matter.
Just for instance, for the whole situation of what happened with Mike Brown, police come up, tell you get the F off the curb. There's no respect there. There's no humanity in it.
Johnson's client, Corliss Huddleston, describes a history of neighborhoods segregated between blacks and whites, with no crossing over.
If you went over that street, say when we were children for trick-or-treating or anything, all the lights went out, eggs were thrown at us, with toilet paper. It's always been tension.
Brian Fletcher, former mayor of Ferguson, says that was the past.
The bigots left a long time ago in the 70s and 80s and 90s. If you're here and you have the financial means to go anywhere you want, like I do, that means you accept diversity and you embrace it. And your friends are a multicolored rainbow of colors.
The story of Ferguson is the story of many communities in America, where diversity has taken root, but remnants of a segregated past manifest themselves in subtle ways, most of them economic. In this majority black community near the city of St. Louis, there are only 3 black police officers, partly because of a cultural pushback from the black community to joining police, says Fletcher.
Our black police officers have been called Uncle Toms. Because they're black and they're a police officer, like they're traitors.
Blacks hardly participate in local governance or vote in local elections here, a culture developed over decades of feeling disenfranchised, but also because council members, including the mayor, make only a couple of $100 a month and have to devote a significant amount of their time, a luxury many poor black residents do not have. So, like many communities in America and maybe the world, racism in Ferguson is not so much about black or white anymore. It is more about the haves and the have-nots. Aisha Tanzim, VOA News, Ferguson.
Well, not too far from our studios here, a group of Muslims were invited to worship on Friday in the Washington National Cathedral. The hope was that an Islamic service, one of America's best-known churches, would send a message of interfaith harmony to counter extremists' use of religion to justify hatred and strife. VOA religion correspondent Jerome Sokolovsky reports.
The call to prayer made it sound, and at times it even looked like a mosque, in the north transept where the service was held. Under the National Cathedral's Gothic arches, Reverend Gina Campbell welcomed worshippers by saying the shrine was
chartered by Congress to be a national cathedral, a house of prayer for all people.
Organizers chose this space so that worshippers could face east towards Mecca without seeing the cathedral's crosses and other Christian icons. In his khutbah, or sermon, South African Ambassador Ibrahim Rasool said tolerance works both ways.
That which we desire for ourselves by way of freedom of belief, freedom of worship, and freedom of conscience in the United States of America, we must desire for Christians and those of other faiths in the heartlands of Islam.
Rasool said he hopes someday non-Muslims will be able to pray in the world's greatest mosques.
Allahu Akbar. I think that we must return to the Muslim prophetic tradition in which the Prophet
may peace be upon him, invited Christians into his own mosque that he established in Medina, and to say to them, you can pray here.
Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior.
Except for that one disruption, these Muslims were able to perform their prayers in peace. Jerome Sokolovsky, VOA News, Washington.
Welcome back. Now, by 2018, a large solar power plant in the Tunisian part of the Sahara Desert may start sending power to energy-hungry Western Europe. While the company running the plant says once it is fully operational, it will generate almost twice as much electricity as an average nuclear plant and supply 2 million homes in Europe. Now, viewers, George Putic reports.
According to the European Commission's Institute for Energy, just 0.3% of the Sahara Desert's intense solar energy can provide Europe with all the electrical power it needs. A company called Noor Energy plans to capture some of it by building a solar plant similar to this Israeli one in Negev Desert using heliotropic mirrors. The technology, unlike photovoltaic cells, can generate energy even when the sky is overcast or at night. Thousands of mirrors spread over 100 square kilometers will concentrate sunlight to a tower where it heats and melts a special salt. Kevin Sarah is the CEO of Noor Energy.
So you can then store that heat very easily so you can continue producing electricity after the sun goes down.
In a heat exchanger, the molten salt turns water into steam for turbines that turn electrical generators. Sarah says the project could significantly decrease use of fossil fuels in Europe.
We could gradually decarbonize the European grid using desert power and using this solar energy with storage from the Sahara Desert and linked to Europe with high voltage DC cables, which are very, very low in their losses.
The cable link to Europe is another interesting part of the project. Instead of the usual alternating current transmission, Noor Energy plans to send the power by a dedicated direct current underwater cable that has only 3% loss of power per 1,000 kilometers. In addition to being cheaper, this technology requires no synchronization between different AC transmission systems. Recently, Tunisia held its second democratic parliamentary elections. Sarah says the solar energy project could contribute to the country's stability.
A lot of this equipment can be manufactured by local Tunisian companies, and that will create employment and employment opportunities for the Tunisian youth.
The construction of the solar plant in southwestern Tunisia is expected to start by the end of 2016, with the first kilowatts being delivered by late 2018. George Putic, VOA News, Washington.
Well, it's time now for a short break, still to come on Africa 54. Musicians unite in the fight against Ebola, and the new single is already a hit. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. Dr. Martin Salya dies from Ebola at the Nebraska Medical Center after treating Ebola patients in his native Sierra Leone. Burkina Faso political and military leaders select Michael Kafando as interim president and sign a year-long transition charter. In Nigeria, 6 people are killed in Kano at a suicide bomb attack near a gas station by suspected Boko Haram militants. And in Mali, the World Health Organization, monitoring more than 200 people for Ebola, warns of possible new cases. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending.
At Christmas time, we let in light and we banish shade.
And in our
You're watching the Do They Know It's Christmas video by the new band Aid. This project is taking place almost 30 years after musician Bob Geldof invited some of the biggest stars at the time to record a charity single to help those affected by famine in Ethiopia. This time the track is to aid victims of the Ebola crisis. U2's Bono is so far the only artist from the original lineup returning. The new Band Aid single raised a whopping £1 million for Ebola within 5 minutes. And here's another first look. While fans of the steamy novel 50 Shades of Grey have been treated with a new extended trailer for the upcoming big screen adaptation. Universal Pictures released the trailer for the hotly anticipated film, which stars Dakota Johnson and Jamie Dornan, and is set to open in time for Valentine's Day on February the 13th, 2015. The film is based on the 2011 novel, which became a smash hit and cultural phenomenon, spawning offshoots and parodies. And finally, a new trend, tailor-made for film fans. If you're a movie mad and like being part of the action, well, 4DX is the latest technology transforming the cinema experience. It's no longer just about what's happening on the screen. 4DX cinema rumbles, rocks, sways, vibrates, smokes, strobes, sprays water, tickles your legs, and even introduces smells. Well, Los Angeles is now the first and only U.S. city to have a 4DX theater, showcasing the latest version that includes 3 motion and 8 environmental effects. And that is what is trending today. Well, a religious girls' school in Rwanda, 13 years before the genocide of 1994, is the setting of a new play premiering this week at Signature Theatre in New York. Here's VOA's Caroline Weaver.
Our Lady of Kibeho at Signature Theatre in New York is based on a real episode. In 1981, 3 young women at a Catholic boarding school in southern Rwanda began reporting visions of the Virgin Mary, the mother of Jesus Christ in Christian belief.
You just want attention, you silly girl. You just want people to see you.
See me? No, I want you to see her, Natalie. Oh, I wish you could see what I see, know what I know her. She wants to embrace us with the greatest love.
The girls said Mary urged prayer and repentance by all the world to avert a terrible war, and in one terrifying vision showed Rwanda's rivers streaming with blood and bodies littering the ground. To many Rwandans later, it seemed as if that vision foretold the Rwandan genocide of 1994. Playwright Katori Hall said she was 13 when she first learned about it.
And I remember standing in front of the television in my bedroom in Memphis, Tennessee, and seeing all these brown bodies floating down a river. And I was just struck by it. That particular vision imprinted itself on my mind, and it stayed with me. I was like, how did this happen? Why did this happen? Why are these people who look like me floating down a river?
It wasn't until many years later, when she traveled to Rwanda, that she heard of the visions at Kibeho.
And I had always been wanting to write about that tumultuous, moment in history, and I was like, this is the perfect way, this is the perfect frame to do so. I didn't want to do the usual, during the genocide. I wanted to do something that was about the before.
The diocese is going to close Kibeho College.
No!
Yes, but I like it here.
The play's cast includes a number of actors who are first- or second-generation immigrants from African countries. Joaquina Kalukango, whose parents are from Angola, plays one of the visionary schoolgirls.
I just like the fact that it's before the genocide. You get to see the life in the community of these people before the littlest things. You get hints of the tension.
Kalukango, who lost family members in the Angolan War, says acting in Our Lady of Cabejo helped deepen her sense of what life demands.
You look at this play and you have to take a moment and with yourself and truly say, what are you going to do? What is your stance in the world? What do you believe? And what will be your standards? And what will you give? And will you show love? I think that's the beauty of this play. It allows you to confront those things head on.
Our Lady of Cabejo at New York Signature Theater runs through December 7th. Carolyn Weaver, VOA News, New York.
Well, that's right. It's time for Monday Sports Report, and here's Sunny Young with the sunny side of sports. Hello, Sunny.
Hello, Vincent, and sporty greetings once again to our Africa 54 viewers. Let's begin with boxing. World heavyweight champion Vladimir Klitschko in the red trunks successfully defended his titles over the weekend with a fifth-round knockout of Bulgaria's Kubrat Pulev in Hamburg, Germany. The 38-year-old Klitschko hasn't lost a fight in more than 10 years. He knocked Pulev down 3 times in the opening 3 rounds before finishing him off with a left hook. With the win, Klitschko improved his pro record to 63 victories and 3 defeats with 53 knockouts. Turning to African football, 10 teams have now qualified for the 2015 Nations Cup tournament in Equatorial Guinea following weekend action. The remaining 6 places will be decided after matches on Wednesday. One of the teams still looking to book its ticket is defending champion Nigeria. These happy fans in Nigeria's political capital, Abuja, cheered and celebrated as they watched their national team, the Super Eagles, score a 2-0 road victory over the weekend over Congo Brazzaville. The victory brightens Nigeria's chances of making it to Equatorial Guinea 2015. One of the delighted Nigerian fans is Yakubu Ahmed.
No be super happy today. Today I got chop like 3 plates of food today because I'm very, very happy. No be super shout, I shout for this house today. So I thank God. Nigeria don't win this match today. My own the next prayer, God will help us to win South Africa no next day.
As Yakubu mentioned, Nigeria will play South Africa on Wednesday. The match will be played in Nigeria's new stadium in Uyo, Akwa Ibom State. The South Africans topped their group with an unbeatable 11 points, and they already have qualified for the 2015 Nations Cup. I'm VOA's Sunny Young, and that's the sunny side of sports. Vincent?
Hey, Sunny, thank you very much. And be sure to watch the sunny side of sports every Monday and Friday right here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com for more news. Tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us here in Washington, have a good night. We are able to touch on things that are important to people on an everyday basis. Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. In a lively half hour, news, sports, health, lifestyle information, comments from our viewers. Africa 54, the best for Africa, about Africa. Join us only on VOA. I'm Vincent McCory from Africa 54. This is VOA. Follow us on Africa 54. Go to facebook.com/VOA Africa 54.